Thank you for joining XROM, which is India's first AR/VR focused podcast. And today, I'm delighted and honored to have with me Mr. Charles Carriere, who's the president and co-founder of Scandy, one of the first 3D scanning depth sensors and computer vision companies. Their vision is to make 3D capture accessible for everyone. Mr. Carriere is also the founder of Anthriscan, a 3D printing company. So, Charles, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. We'll really appreciate if you can start with an intro and background.
Sure, would love to. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to speak with you today. I had I was had a 20-year career in finance and was doing that. And a good friend of mine was working for a 3D printing company, and they were being very acquisitive, and they were looking for folks that were developing applications in the space and wanted to help promote that. And he was saying, I really need a company that can build a 3D scan to 3D print application. And so we launched our first app. The original impetus for this was the company that he was working for had just signed a deal with Intel for their for their
depth
sensor
sensing camera.
Yeah, so for their depth sensing camera, and the idea was that this was going to be on 1 million tablets, and meeting a germ 2014. So we founded the company in July, and it was like, wow, we're going to have a market. This is great. Well, fast forward to Christmas, we didn't have our app out, but it didn't matter because there weren't 1 million laptops and computers with depth sensors in them. But there was the structure sensor made by Occipital that was you could fit on an iPad and capture a scan. And so we built an app that allowed you to capture a 3D scan and send that to a company that 3D printed. That was Entriscan. So you mentioned Entriscan, which has been we've sold that company to some colleagues that we were working with, and they're running that very successfully today. But this is what we were originally doing. We were basically doing these 3D printed figurines. We were basically fighting a couple of different things in the market, which not the least of which was there weren't that many consumer depth sensors available for us to build a market on. So anyway, we had some time in the wilderness there, and we ended up meeting a German depth sensor company called PMD Technologies, and they built the depth sensors for Google's Tango phone. I don't know if your listeners will remember, but there were a number of different phone companies that were building these phones to Google's Tango spec, and so those were the first augmented reality phones. And we built our scanning software on that, and that was obviously in the Android ecosystem. And so we were doing a lot of what I thought was very good work there. We were sitting at the table with folks like Google and Qualcomm, and having really fun and interesting conversations. And then Google went and killed Tango, as Googlers want to do. So we're like, oh, now what are we going to do? But fortunately, along the way, we'd made some good contacts that in the industry that said, just sit tight, Apple's going to do something interesting. And so, I guess 2 or 3 months after Google officially killed Tango, they came out with the iPhone 10. And the iPhone 10 had a depth sensor on the front, which is what we know now is the Face ID camera that unlocks your phone. And within a couple of weeks after having access to an iPhone 10, we demoed 3D scanning on that phone. So the rest is at that point we were off to the races. We had a mass market consumer device that had a depth sensor in it. So that's really what we built for. So we tried for a while to manage the Apple and the Android ecosystem, because we were still maintaining support for Android, for the few Tango phones that were out there and some of the Android phones. But ultimately, we realized that in order with a relatively small team, the real thing that we had to focus on was the Apple ecosystem. So that's what we've done.
Right. Charles, I mean, sometimes, when you get too early into this ecosystem, it looks a little over promising, but then, there are so much you learn from it, but you also get burnt, and that's what happens. I mean, specifically if you're a small startup. I mean, I think that I had a similar journey somewhere around 2016, not early as 2014, 2016, around 2015, I discovered virtual reality, and 2016, Google had built Odyssey, which is a 16 camera rig, a stereoscopic virtual reality rig. And at the same point in time, I think Facebook had a camera, Nokia had the Ozo, and we thought, that's you opportunity away, because it was really, really expensive, and to import it over here, Bollywood is big, right? The entertainment market, and they wanted to create something in virtual reality. I thought that's an opportunity, and can we create a virtual reality camera? And we spent a whole lot of money, did a lot of research, we built our prototype of a 16 camera rig, and then we realized that, wow, there's no buyers. But the world has completely changed, from 2014 till now. I think because of COVID, all of these tech stack has been accelerated into the future. And thanks to Facebook rebranding as Metaverse, I think that rush of us moving from the flat interface to the 3D world because of Metaverse is like really pushed. The conversation has like really, really accelerated. So Scandy, one of the first few companies in the world of computer vision and making 3D capture accessible for everyone. Where do you guys stand at this point in time? Talk a little bit about Scandy and the product.
Sure. Well, so we basically have two lines of business. We have Scandy Pro, which is our app that we've that's in the App Store, and we're continuing to iterate on that. We had a little bit of additional time in the wilderness, working with some companies. Big companies are really good at getting small companies to do work for them on the hope and the promise that there'll be a big contract or an acquisition or whatever. And so we've kind of had some missteps there, but we're really focused on Scandy Pro right now. In addition, we also license Roux. It's spelled R-O-U-X, and that's our core. That's our 3D scanning SDK. We named it Roux because that's we're from South Louisiana, and a roux is basically the base of a lot of a gumbo. So that's kind of the thing that, is core to what you're building, if you're cooking a gumbo. So anyway, the Roux SDK allows other companies to build apps with 3D scanning built into that. So we also license the Roux SDK to other folks. And so it's being used in a number of different verticals. There are folks in the podiatry space that are using the Roux SDK for their apps, where folks are podiatrists are scanning feet for custom orthotics and ankle foot appliances. There are some folks that are using our software, looking at that for facial scanning, for dental and other reconstruction. So there are a lot of folks in the medical field that are interested, that are either using Scandy Pro or our Roux SDK to build applications for scanning of different human body parts. And that's really where Scandy, I would say the app plus the hardware combination of the iPhones with TrueDepth sensors, that's where the combination really shines, is in body scanning.
Right. Would you like to elaborate a little bit more on the applications? Because I was going, through your YouTube pages. I mean, you guys don't seem to be so active, on the social media side. Then there are these new bunch of players, new kids. Like, in fact, I think just a few episodes back, I mean, I interviewed Luma AI, and they are like really going bonkers. So maybe address your competitors and talk about the applications. You mentioned about healthcare. Who are your users and users and applications?
There's some others that have been, kind of either acquired or by other companies that have taken that in. So from a, just a pure 3D scanning with the TrueDepth sensor, right now. There are some other companies that, are doing something similar. Obviously, I think we do it best when we're really focused on making it better. And in terms of you asked about more about the applications, what people are using it for. So if you think about what Scandy's strengths are, it's basically making a geometrically accurate 3D scan, right? And so, for instance, if you wanted to do something in the metaverse, right? If you wanted to capture, if you wanted to basically put a representation of yourself in the metaverse, then geometric accuracy may not be the critical sticking point for that, right? However, if you are trying to basically take a scan of your face in order to fit eyeglasses and get custom made eyeglasses, or you wanted to take a scan of your foot to make a custom orthotic that would perform better than a generic orthotic, just something off the shelf. Oh, you have a size 9 foot, we'll get you a size 9 orthotic, as opposed to scanning the bottom of your foot and seeing the contour of your arch and then 3D printing an arch that would fit with your foot. Geometric accuracy at that point is very important. And so that's really where we, and where our, 3D scanning, where you have a patient, you want to see in real time or near real time, did I get an accurate scan? Whereas, for a photogrammetry application, that's not going to be as useful. So that's kind of where Scandy is effectively focused and where we have our niche.
Right. Yeah. So maybe elaborate a little bit more about this geometric way of capturing things versus photogrammetry. Maybe elaborate and maybe go back and maybe talk a little bit about the tech stack. The nerves. How do you go about creating the application that you built?
So, in terms of, photogrammetry can have, fantastic results. So I certainly don't want to suggest that that's not a great, it's not a great tool. For instance, I think that, if you are, trying to capture, for instance, for e-commerce, if you're trying to capture, a shoe that you wanted to sell, right? You could have a photogrammetry rig. You could put the shoe on a pedestal. You get the great, you get the perfect lighting. You take, 20 to 200 pictures. You send it off to a server. It reconstructs it. It looks absolutely beautiful. Great, fantastic. Not going to argue with that. You can get a very good scan with Scandy Pro of that tennis shoe, but quite frankly, our texture mapping is, I think, very good, but it's not as good. You're not going to get potentially as good results as if you have a really good photogrammetry pipeline that's taking thousands or hundreds of or thousands of pictures and stitching them all together. Effectively what Scandy Pro does when we capture a scan is that we're giving you feedback in near real time, right? You're seeing what's being captured. We give you feedback to say, ooh, you've lost tracking, so we don't have high confidence on, the frames that you're getting now. We offer the user an opportunity to realign. So right away whether the scan you've captured is good. All the processing's done on the phone. You don't have to send anything to the cloud. And once it's done, it for a larger scan, it may take, 10 to 20 seconds to kind of finish the processing in the phone, but you can see in real time right there, okay, cool. I've gotten this scan. This looks good for the use case that I want. So for instance, for a doctor with a patient, it's important for him to be able to know, okay, I've got the file that I need, as opposed to waiting for 10, 20 minutes or even 5 minutes for the rendering to be done. The other thing that I would say that's interesting that I think a lot of folks are using Scandy Pro for is cosplay. So there are a lot of folks that want to make, say, Iron Man armor or Black Panther armor or something like that. And so these are folks that spend a tremendous amount of time on their costumes, and getting the right fit for 3D printed plastic is probably pretty important. Otherwise, it's going to be uncomfortable to put on. So we know that a lot of cosplayers have used Scandy Pro to make to help design and size their costumes.
What's the pricing plan, and what are the devices that it works on currently?
Great. So the devices that it works on currently are any iOS device that has the Face ID on it, right? The TrueDepth sensor. So that is the iPhone 10, 10s, 10R, 11, 12, 13, and 14, and also any iPad Pro after 2018. We do get a lot of folks that ask us about LiDAR scanning on the more recent iPads Pro and the 12, 13, and 14. We had support for LiDAR in there, and we were making some adjustments to our software, and it was, we have a very small team, so we just decided to focus on TrueDepth object scanning. I can go into the differences between object scanning and environment scanning. But effectively, we're really, leaning into object scanning. We may add back LiDAR support in our app later, but there are other apps that do LiDAR very well for free.
Right. Yeah. Would you like to elaborate on your object and environment scanning? Do you do
Sure.
environment scanning also?
So no, I mean, you can scan an environment with, I could use Scandy Pro to scan effectively part of this room, but when you think about the depth sensor that's on the TrueDepth depth sensor, it's made to be used within arm's length of your face, right? That's why Apple put it in there for facial recognition, right? So it's not, and the depth, the dot pattern that the infrared sensor projects and reads is pretty dense. So it captures a lot. The depth map has a lot of resolution, and it captures a lot of information, right? So it's really ideal for scanning anything the size kind of from a foot to basically a small sofa. Like I can get a very good scan of those objects. If I try and scan the room, I'm going to capture more detail than I really need for most room scale applications, and I'm not going to be able to scan the whole room before I run out of memory, right, on the device. So that's why LiDAR with a sparser depth pattern is great for, and the world-facing camera. That's why it's great for room scale scanning. It's a sparser depth pattern. Again, if you're asking me to get into the technical weeds, I'm not the guy to do that. That's more of our engineers to explain the differences. So I can explain the differences to a layman, but probably not to a tech geek.
What's the pricing plan at this point in time?
Right. At this point, go ahead.
Yeah. And while you talk about the pricing plan, also talk about Metaverse, because I mean, in the beginning of the conversation, I was mentioning that how we are breaking away from a 2D interface and we're going to enter the 3D world. So where is the opportunity? Where's the largest opportunity you see for Scandy?
So right now, and we're about to change the pricing plan a little bit. It'll be roughly the same. So right now, we offer the app is free to download, and we offer one free scan per week. And if you wanted to, free scan save per week. So if you want to save the scan, you get one a week. If you want unlimited scan saves, we have a monthly plan for $6 a month US, and an annual plan for $50 a month US. And then there's an unlimited for lifetime for $150 US. We are in the process of changing the architecture, and it's probably going to be a couple of months before we get it out there. But effectively, what we're going to change to is you can scan and save all you want, but you can't export without that, because we understand that 3D scanning is not like taking a picture, right? It does take some effort. It doesn't, it's not a, like click, I'm done and it looks great. It really does take some time and care. You want your subject to stay slow, to be very still. There's certain settings that you're going to play around with. And so we understand that, we've done an analysis, and far and away, 95 to 98% of the folks that are coming to our app are novices. They just want to try it out. And so clearly, we want to change that so that folks can really, they can scan, they can, they can save these scans, but if they want to do anything with them, then, we can ask them to pay us a little money in order to do that. So we're evaluating the pricing. I think that, to the extent that there's, there's a small group of users that use it all the time. And, clearly they're getting a huge bargain. under our current pricing plan. That being said, we're also aware that we want to make it accessible to many more people who want to create. So if we move from that conversation into what this could look like in the metaverse, right? I think that to a certain extent, if people are, capturing, if, for instance, if I have this room and I want to recreate it in the metaverse to have, say, a virtual meeting, in my little home office, might I want to populate my home office with, with scanned objects, with 3D objects that I can walk around and look at. So the opportunity to, scan something and, have that 3D file and then drop it virtually as I'm creating my sort of metaverse little environment, I think is pretty exciting. I think there may be some folks that want to do that. The other thing that we played around with for a while, and again, we're very guilty of being early in things. We had a volumetric 3D scan application called Hoxel, where basically, if you think about it, it's basically a moving 3D scan. So if we ever get any interest, in that from others, we may, or we have some spare engineering cycles, we may bring that back out. But for the time being, we really are focused on. Sorry for the background noise. For the time being, we really are focused on making Scandy Pro better. I think you asked me earlier about my roadmap, and I didn't. I forgot, but I'm happy to kind of address that right now if you're interested. But
yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah. So, right now, the most recent thing that we did is we really improved the quality of our texture mapping. So when a user captures a scan, they capture it with, we bring all the data in, and so that doesn't change, but they can capture in monochrome, and the default scanning, the default color scanning we do is called per vertex scanning, where each individual depth point has an RGB value, and we interpolate, the points between two depth frames, but with those different RGB values. So it looks very good, but it doesn't look as high resolution as consumers are used to seeing, given the quality of the cameras on digital phones right now. We've recently improved so the other way that you can capture a color scan is with a texture map, where you have a representation of the mesh, which is all the points, the X, Y, and Z points in 3D space. And then you have a series of images, which you then associate with those points, and you effectively wrap those images over the mesh, right, to give you a much more high resolution color scan. And so we've improved that a lot in terms of the seaming and the blending. And I think we'll continue to iterate on that, because people want scans that are not just geometrically accurate, but that also look really pretty. And so I think that will help users as well. We're constantly working on making our tracking better, so allowing users to move the camera across an object and capture that better with less tracking error. So we continue to iterate on that. Like I mentioned, we're going to change the way that we charge for scans. We're going to allow users to be able to rename their scans and not just display them in chronological order. So just really making the app more user friendly. We've recently introduced a bunch of user feedback that should allow novices to understand what's going on when they, download the app. So we've kind of moved away from saying, hey, this is a pro level tool, figure it out for yourself, to being more user friendly to novice users that come into the 3D ecosystem.
Yeah, with these tech stack, it's going to enable, I think, anyone and everyone to be a creator, play a role in building the metaverse or the future of internet that we have all imagined. So far, Web 2.0 was built, top down hierarchically with, these big tech companies. And today there are entrepreneurs such as yourself who are giving the tools for anyone and everyone to participate, scan your objects, your world, and you saying, saying that you're making it as simple as possible that people can do it and capture those objects and load it onto the metaverses, build their own metaverses. You mentioned about volumetric, and I think volumetric is again going to play such a huge role, though it's in such an early stage, and it's always like the question: are we too early, or should we take a leap of faith and go build volumetric content? Because I think we've been restricted for the 2D interface for such a long time, and we need brave entrepreneurs to push the boundaries, and maybe the virtual world, the metaverse that we are building, will be possibly then exactly like this. Maybe talk a little bit about the volumetric stuff that you're doing, and what are your views on India as a market opportunity?
Oh, I think India is a tremendous market opportunity. I'm, super excited. I mean, when you think about the content creation that goes on in India, just in terms of the film industry with Bollywood, right, and just the massive amount of content that is created in India and consumed in India, I see no reason why that country can't lead the charge with this. There's so much innovation that I see coming out of there, and I've actually I spent a little bit of time in India when I was in college and absolutely adored it. I haven't been back since, but it would be wonderful to find an excuse to get back there. That being said, switching to volumetric, and I think that it is, we're still very early on in the process. I mean, I agree with your contention that, what we are trying to do is make 3D accessible to everyone. I think that the real sticking point is people can make really, really good 2D content really easily right now. That's what, the phones that are out there, it just makes it, everybody, 30 years ago, 20, I mean, look, even 15 years ago, people didn't walk around with a high, nobody was walking around with a high quality camera in their pocket, right? And it was, film was basically the key to, capturing memories, right? So, I think that the sticking point with 3D content is that you're fighting against something that is, you're comparing it to something that's so high quality in 2D. So when I was demonstrating volumetric video from an iPhone, streaming it to the web, and I was, I remembered it showing it to, actually I was capturing it from one phone, streaming it over Wi-Fi to another phone that was representing that volumetric video in augmented reality that we had built. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I showed it to this, not executive, but this YouTube manager, thinking that they're like, well, the quality's just not great, is it? I'm like, what do you mean the quality's not great? I am, streaming a volumetric video that you can see from, kind of like 180 degrees either side to another phone in augmented reality, showing that, in a different space. How are you complaining about the quality? And, she basically just said, like, users are used to these, perfect images. So I think that that's the, it's not the uncanny valley. It's not a technical thing. Is it good enough so that users will be sort of excited to create that, proud to show it to folks? Because you really are, you really are competing against something that is really, is already really good. So I think that's the real sticking point.
Right, fair enough, and that's what I mean the users want. I mean, with all the tech gizmos or the jargons that we give them, it's all about creating something so compelling that they are compelled to move to the new interface. So Charles, really appreciate you taking time and being part of the podcast. Wish you and the team the very best. My last question is, because there is this convergence of technologies which is happening, and then there's this artificial intelligence which is playing a huge role in content creation. We're seeing the glimpses of the the role of content creator being upended or defined, because there's artificial intelligence which is creating content. There's like stacks such as, Stable Diffusion, Dolly, and Mid Journey, where you can do, text to your image. That people are doing text to video and so on and so forth. In that world, what would you have to say? How is content going to get upended in that world, and possibly maybe the role of Scandy?
Yeah, so I think that's highly likely that we'll see something. I know a number of different companies are working on that. We've had some conversations, because there are companies that want to use the scans to help train models for creating things. So for the AI models, so you can say you feed it 500 scans of a chair, and you label that, and you're like, okay, create a 3D model of a chair. So I think that's absolutely going to happen. I can't tell you if it's going to happen in 6 months or 24 months, but I don't think it's 5 years away, because I think, like you said, the metaverse is coming. People want to be able to populate it, and that's highly likely. So I think that clearly like you said, the role of content creators is going to be upended, and this is going to be another tool, and the content creators that figure out how to use this tool, right, can do it. Like, I've played around with Stable Diffusion, and my prompts don't generate the same looking stuff that the folks that are showing this great stuff on there. I haven't taken the time to go in and tweak things. I haven't taken the time to really understand the guts of it, and that's fine. That's not my job. I just I like playing around with it, but I also understand the difference, that this is not necessarily plug and play, and it's still going to take creativity. It's still going to take time and effort. It's going, the great thing is that those of us that want to consume it, wow, isn't it awesome that many more people can, who really want to get into it. So I don't think I think it certainly disrupts that creator industry. I don't think it makes it go away, because I still think you need people that put passion and time and energy behind it, and that's what's going to deliver the best results. They just have another tool at their disposal.
Right, completely with you, Charles. I think this is a tool which is gonna add so much value to the content creator's journey, because through this, instead of spending hours or maybe a huge team, you can leverage AI for at least creating a reference point and then iterating on that. So I think the creators need to leverage these opportunities, and through Scandy, maybe in the next few years, we'll be populating the entire metaverse through these 3D objects and 3D environments. So wish you and the team the very best. And to my listeners, if you like what you see and hear, then please press the subscribe button, and until next time, see you guys. Bye bye. Thank you, Charles. Really appreciate this.
Thank you so much, Eddie. This was fun. I love speaking with you, and I look forward to following your podcast along the way. That's awesome.